All right, man. Let's move on now to another interesting situation with the Montreal Canadiens.
Keep it coming, Montreal. Keep it coming.
As we said, it just never ends with this team. They made the shocking, stunning, just insane decision to draft defenseman Logan Mailloux in the first round of the 2021 NHL Draft. So for those of you who aren't up to date with the situation regarding Logan Mailloux, he was playing hockey in Sweden this past year. So as we know, COVID essentially wiped out the Canadian Hockey League. So a lot of these guys were playing in Europe and things like that, just to get some training in, just to get some game action in. And Logan Mailloux was playing in Sweden, and he was charged in Sweden for sharing a sexually explicit photo without consent. Yeah. So this is a very serious charge here, okay?
Not cool.
And 3 days before the 2021 draft, he came out with a statement and said that he was renouncing himself from the draft. Now, I will add in, you can't technically renounce yourself and just remove yourself from the draft and, don't give any team the opportunity to pick you. Basically, he came out and said, no one pick me. I haven't shown the correct character, and I don't want to enter the NHL at this time because I have to work on my character issues and things like that. So he came out and said, do not draft me. I'm taking my name out of the running here. I need to focus on myself, become a better person, and I'll come back to the draft next season, essentially, right? So it looked like no one was going to draft Logan Mailloux. Now, he was ranked 35th in Bob McKenzie's rankings for the draft. He was the 23rd ranked North American skater. So this guy was, considered a late first round, early second round pick. So it comes to the Montreal Canadiens late in the first round, 31st overall, and they decide to say, screw it, and take Logan Mailloux.
Yep.
Just a completely bizarre decision. I didn't think it was worth it whatsoever. I thought it was terrible of them to take this kid. But Lepore, I'm going to throw it over to you first. What's your take on this situation and the Habs selecting Logan Mailloux in the first round?
It's such a weird one to me because often in these situations, you try to get in the heads of people to see, try to figure out kind of what they were thinking, where their mindset was at. 'Cause even maybe say you don't agree with them per se, you can at least acknowledge, I kind of know where they were going with that one. I have no idea what Montreal was doing with this. Bergevin just making that decision to draft this kid. Why? If it had this kid been ranked as a top 5 prospect, top 5 blue chip prospect, and this exact situation happened, and he selected him where he selected him, at least at that point, I kind of would have got it. I still would have criticized Bergevin, criticized the pick, saying it's a joke that he picked a kid who didn't want to be drafted and went through all this. But I'd be like, well, he drafted him and he's allowed, so I can understand his perspective. But to take him where he picked him, which was around-ish where that kid should have been picked, is just bizarre to me because, let's face it, once you get to that point in the draft, and the numbers are the numbers, once you leave the top 10, top 15, it's kind of a crapshoot, by round. So picking whoever he had on his page is 1 up or 1 down or 2 up or 2 down. Who knows? You don't really know. So to me, it was just so weird. And what often gets forgotten in professional sports is these teams are PR machines. It's a responsibility to have people like you. And I know that sounds cheesy and it's about winning and this and that, but I'm sure there's a PR team with the Montreal Canadiens. There are people who are hired and their job is public relations. How are we perceived? How are fans of the Montreal Canadiens going to see us? And how are fans of the National Hockey League going to see us? And that's why I don't get it. What did you do here? What was the real and true benefit here to take this kid at this spot? And how they came out with the statement right away. Literally minutes
That's
later.
That's just such a bad look. When you're coming out with a statement to draft a player, a prepared statement.
Minutes later.
Don't you know that that's a stupid decision?
Weird, man. It was so weird. Like my whole thing is just like, I would genuinely appreciate a conversation with Marc Bergevin to ask him like, like why did, like, you knew you were going to look bad. It's not like you knocked it out of the park getting this kid where you got him, because that's about where he was supposed to go. You look awful. And now even too, for this kid, I kind of feel bad for this kid now, because here he made a huge mistake. He was punished for it. And he withdrew himself from the draft as best as he could, as you went over. And I'm sure he made that decision with his family, his agent. And at least for the time being, it's like, okay, I'm going to be forgotten about. He's going through something really personal. Again, he made a huge mistake. And here he is saying, you know what? Leave me alone right now. Let me go through this. Let me start fresh. And then again, and let's laugh about it. Of all teams to draft him, the Montreal Canadiens. So now everyone is even people who didn't know about this story now know about this story. Even like casual hockey fans, it's on like even regular media, and by that I mean like non-sports media, people talking about this. And because Montreal drafted him, and because they are the Montreal Canadiens, this kid will have that label. He will 100% have that label, at least for the early phases of his career. Like his first, let's say 2-3 years from now, his first NHL game. Oh, remember this kid, that thing happened in Sweden. He got in trouble. He didn't want to be drafted, and that's going to be the talking point. That is going to be the talking point. And then if he's not successful, and let's face it, most kids who are drafted, even in the first round, are not, or at least half of them are not in the first round. Is that going to be the label of why? What was the positive here? Like, again, for this kid to say, I do not want to be drafted. I think people are forgetting about that too. This kid publicly said, I do not want to be drafted. And they did it anyway. It's completely perplexing to me, because I see zero benefit or reward for Montreal to do it, both from a hockey perspective and a public relations perspective.
Yeah, it makes absolutely no fucking sense that they took this kid. And I thought you laid it out perfectly there, Lepore. Like what was the upside in taking this guy where you took him? Like where, like from all different facets that we can look at this, like in terms of not only his skill level, but knowing what the backlash was going to be.
Yeah.
Just from everyone, and not just on Twitter, but just literally, people.
Oh, he's getting destroyed. Bergevin's getting destroyed from like women's groups, this and that.
Oh, it's a complete nightmare. It's like, did you not see that coming?
Horrible.
Like, why put yourself in that situation if you're the Montreal Canadiens? This kid was charged with a crime, and it was bad. Okay, let's not sugarcoat what this guy did. It was a terrible decision. I know he's a young kid, but it's just an awful decision. You also think about the victim too in this situation and what she's going through, dealing with all this now he's been actually drafted by the Montreal Canadiens and this story is blowing up, right? But if you're the Montreal Canadiens, it's like, what the fuck was going through your head? How on earth did you come to the decision that this was the right move to make? That considering all other options on the table, all other players available, that the right decision was taking this kid who committed this crime back in the fall and who withdrew his name from the NHL draft.
Yeah.
It to me is just, it's the most mind-boggling thing I think I've seen really all year. I mean, there's a lot of dumb decisions that are made in professional sports, when it comes to trades and free agency. And we like to, debate and argue and talk about those things ad nauseum. But I think this is just right at the top of the list. And it, to me, just shows a complete lack of awareness on not only Marc Bergevin, but Jeff Molson and that entire Montreal Canadiens organization.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Because I'm sure he knows who's going to get picked, but let's say he wasn't fully where, like, maybe he wasn't. Like, if I'm him, I'm pissed. Like, I'm pissed. Like, I own this product, and you're putting it through shit, man. Like,
and then it's like, he's had interviews and stuff like that. Like, they did a Zoom call with Logan Mailloux, and it's like, what do you expect him to say at this point?
Oh my God, it was so awkward. He's like sitting there. Even people are like, why isn't he talking? I'm like, what do you want him to say?
Yeah. And it's like, I'm not trying to defend the kid, but it's like, at that point, what do you want him to say? Like, he didn't want to get drafted, and now one of the most storied franchises in the National Hockey League, one of the most recognizable franchises in professional sports, the Montreal Canadiens decide to take this guy in the first round. It's just brutal. And it's like you said, Lepore, this is going to follow this kid throughout his career. It was going to follow him throughout his career. Let's say he goes through this draft. No one takes him. He enters the 2022 draft. You know, he's the new, mature Logan Mailloux. He's learned from his mistakes. He's grown as a person. It still would have followed him.
But even Bruno, I'll make the point too. So that all happens, and he gets drafted by Nashville.
Yeah.
Then they mention it when he's drafted.
Exactly.
On the and then we never hear about it ever again.
The story never really comes up.
No.
You know, people around the hockey community obviously would have been well aware of it, and it would have followed him to a certain extent, but it would not even have been close to what's about to happen now, that he's actually a member of the Montreal Canadiens and that they took him 3 days after he released a statement saying, I do not want to be drafted. So,
do you think, and I think this is where it gets loaded, because like we don't know like this stuff. Do you think he knew?
So here's the thing. I was listening to his Zoom call and they asked him that specifically, Lepore. They said,
oh, did they? Okay.
They said, did you talk to Marc Bergevin like within the last week? Or specifically, did you talk to Marc Bergevin after you had released that statement? He said he didn't. So I don't know if we're going to take his word for it. Who knows? He could be lying. You never know, right? He could have spoken.
Because then too, if he did know, like that's some shady bullshit.
Yeah.
Because then that opens a can of worms.
Shady.
Kids can do that, and then
talk to Bergevin or the Habs, Lepore. I think he said the last time he talked to them was like a week or 2 or 3 weeks before the draft. So he's saying that the week of the draft, and specifically after he made that statement, that he did not have any contact with the Montreal Canadiens.
Makes you wonder, though. Makes you wonder, man, because like this draft was done, like the kids were on Zoom and like sitting with their families. Was he watching it? Like, I mean, if you're in that situation, what this kid went through, are you watching the draft? So like, I don't know what's more weird, him sitting there watching the draft and Bergevin goes up there and picks him, or if he's just doing something else and all of a sudden his phone's blowing up from every person he knows because he was selected. Just, man, like this is a reality show, man. Like this one is a full-blown reality show.
Yeah, like this, it's just such a bizarre situation. And like you said, man, like, is he like sitting on the couch being like, oh, I wonder if I'm going to get drafted in the first round here by any of these teams? Or was he just like, I don't know, out at a restaurant or something with his family or with his buddies doing something completely different while the draft? Like, who knows? It's just such a bizarre situation. Like, imagine like receiving that call. I mean, I guess, you know, like in the NFL, like when they'll call the guy before he gets drafted. I know in the NHL, it's not exactly the same, but like, was he just sitting on his couch and being like, holy shit, the Montreal Canadiens just picked me in the first round?
I'd love to see like a screen thing of his phone. If that's what happened, if he didn't know, imagine like everything just coming through like Montreal ? Montreal what? I thought you were getting like, oh my God, it would have been hilarious. But
yeah, it's just insane. And honestly, man, it's gonna be tough sledding now, not only for the Habs organization, but for Logan Mailloux moving forward. Like, he is now being put in, you know, like I said, one of the biggest markets in the NHL. This is the Montreal Canadiens. They're a massive brand. They just went to the Stanley Cup final. All eyes have been on them recently, as we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's being thrust into this situation. And again, I'm not defending this guy. What he did was just awful on so many levels. But yeah, for the Montreal Canadiens to put themselves in this situation moving forward now and having to navigate this, it just absolutely wasn't worth it. It was pure stupidity. And we're going to see what happens. Like, who knows if this guy is even going to end up playing a game for the Montreal Canadiens. Like, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen moving forward, because it seems
a good one is I guess he's World Junior eligible. I
think he is.
So is he put on that team? Like, how's that looked at from Hockey Canada? Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that plays. He's a first round pick, so you'd think he's on the team. But yeah, it's a weird one. And like, we'll put a cap on it, but from an entertainment standpoint, it's almost too bad this happened in the NHL. Because I think, say this happened in the NBA or the NFL, let's face it, like the kid is going to say all the cliche things. Bergevin's going to say all the cliche things. If they get a hold of the kid's agent, he's going to just, do the basic boring stuff. Had this been the NFL or the NBA, you would have had pissed off people. Like, you would have had the kid voice his actual opinion. You would have had the agent voice his actual opinion, like whatever it was. And I think you would have got more out of the organization as well. So I just think it's going to be boring. Like, anything we hear, anyone's like, oh, yeah, like, I accept it now and I'm going to do my best. And then Montreal is going to say, we see this kid and we see the potential for growth, both on a hockey standpoint and a life standpoint. So it's going to be boring. And I think people know where I'm going with all this, that it's too bad this wasn't the NBA or the NFL.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. But I'll end it on this and say the Montreal Canadiens deserve all the shit that's coming their way with this situation, because you know what? Reporters are going to continue to bring this up and ask,
Poor
why?
Kid, like,
was it worth it? What was going through your head? And I know that they've already gone through this to a certain extent, but now that this kid is in the organization, this is going to keep coming up. And Montreal, you did this to yourselves.
I'll say this, 2 words: training camp. That kid's on the mic. Like, before, he was the first round pick. He would have got some attention, a few questions. Oh, how'd it go? How'd you find it? Or this and that. Now, they're going like to the star players, and then where's Logan? Because we got to try to get a quote from him.
Yeah.
Not fun, man. Not fun.
It's just not a good look. It's a brutal situation, and we'll continue to track it as we move forward here and see what happens. But just an awful decision by the Montreal Canadiens, and just a terrible, terrible look.